Stages of grief during a marriage separation and divorce. In this video, we'll be talking about the stages of grief and what goes on in each stage. And whether you're going through a marriage separation or divorce, the stages of grief is something all people go through, either whole or in part. Whether it's the 5 stages of grief or the 7 stages of grief, it's all still grief. Different wording, same pain. There's no length of time that it takes, or how hard it'll hit you, or in what order. And in dealing with loss, it's important to understand that there will be good days and there will be bad days. Hi, my name is John Mackenzie, and welcome to Kingdom Principles. On this channel, we'll be discussing all things regarding marriage separation, whether you're just going into it, already separated and trying to save your marriage, or just finalizing your divorce. This channel is for you. Your source of info on surviving your marriage separation. So if you find this video helpful, please like and subscribe. There's a subscribe button in the bottom right of the video. And click on the link in the description to get our free report on the 7 things not to do when going through a marriage separation. Now, let's get on to the video. Many people think it doesn't hit you until you're divorced, but it starts during the marriage separation and can even start before that, especially for the person who's looking to initiate the separation. No matter which version you've read about, it's still all stages of grief, whether it's the 5 stages of grief or the 7 stages of grief. And a lot of times it is because someone has died, but it's the same stages when you're going through a marriage separation or a divorce. The 5 stages of grief were first laid out in the book by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, a psychiatrist, in her book on death and dying back in 1969. So this set our basic understanding on the stages of grief and what you go through, starting with denial, then anger, bargaining, then depression, and finally acceptance. And now it's been upgraded to what's known as the 7 stages of grief. The first part is where one is desperate for answers, and they're going through shock and asking why. The next is denial, along with pain and guilt. And then anger. And then you get to the bargaining, or the relapse. Then comes the depression. And then comes the initial acceptance, and finally acceptance and redirected hope. These stages of grief are the same for marriage separation and divorce as it is for a death. To get through this, you're going to need a good support system. And for a lot of people, that support system will include their faith in God. So no matter where you stand, realize you will get through this. It'll take time, but you can and will make it through. Now, before we get to the stages of grief and all the negative things it implies, there's something not mentioned much in the discussion of grief and marriage separation that's different from death. But unlike dealing with the actual death of a spouse, friend, or family member, there is a chance of raising your marriage back from the dead. Now, this can happen at any point during the marriage separation and even after divorce. But it usually happens between the denial, anger, depression, and relapse phase, somewhere in there. Now, at some point, you may get to the point where you're willing to do whatever it takes to restore your marriage. Now, this can be a good or a bad thing, depending on what you end up doing. Now, it can be the catalyst for change that your marriage needs, or it can be the gasoline thrown on the house fire that's your marriage. As long as you realize that the only one you can change is you, and in making yourself a better version of yourself, there is a chance to save your marriage. By working on and improving yourself, by improving the way you communicate with your spouse, and how you deal with and handle problems that come up. Now let's get back to the discussion on the stages of grief. You fought hard in holding on to this relationship, and you cannot believe it's ending. It, however, becomes more apparent as time goes on that the two of you will not make it. And you start computing that it's over. Now, after giving up and leaving each other space, you go through a withdrawal and you're hit by the reality of the loss. Now, this process can be brutal. It can take a long time until you shake it off completely. Some of the stages that a person goes through after a marriage separation are as follows. Desperate for answers. You want to understand and know why the separation happened so desperately. And the drive is consuming, and it might result in irrational behaviors and thoughts. You remember different things that your spouse would say at different times that feel contradictory after the breakup, and you hold on to them. Now, you're likely to swing back and forth between the magnitude of the loss and the painful clarity of that the relationship's over. All you get to think and talk about might be the disorganization, the pain, the confusion. While talking about the separation, you tend to justify the different reasons on why the relationship should not have ended, as if you're trying to convince your spouse. Denial, shock, and why. You do not believe that it's actually over. You just cannot be without the person. No, this is not happening. It cannot be true. I need to do something to save the relationship. Well, you may also find yourself funneling every last hope and action into saving the relationship, even to the point of risking your emotional and psychological well-being. The reality is painful to face, and you therefore postpone the need for grieving. Denial makes you derail the grieving process temporarily, and you replace it with the hope that the relationship can still be saved, even though it may be unrealistic. This stage feels like you did your best you could for the relationship that was your life and your world. Anger. You might not connect to the feelings of anger at first. However, the breakup throws you into the unknown, and this can trigger immobilizing dread and fear and anger in the process. Now, this anger can be empowering, as you will feel that you matter too, that you deserve more from the relationship. And depending on your personality and the uniqueness of the breakup and social support, among other things, you might direct your anger to yourself, to your spouse, or to even the situation. Now, such anger is meant to empower you in making changes if you allow it. Bargaining and/or relapse. You feel like you can and will do anything to avoid believing it's over. You'll be better, more attentive. You'll make all those wrongs right. You cannot tolerate the thought of not being with your spouse, and you want to win him or her back at any cost. The hope you're clinging to is preventing the loss of what you have. You most likely blame yourself for all the things that have happened that led to the separation. Probably the marriage failed because I was not playing my part, or probably I was too impatient when dealing with him or her, among other reasons. Bargaining is trying to take responsibility for the why the relationship ended, and may give you an illusion that you can control it. However, do not lose sight that both partners in this relationship played a part in the cause that is ending it. Always remember that bargaining only distracts you from experiencing the loss. Within a short while, the reality more than likely will come crashing down. Relapse. The pain you feel cannot be tolerated. You might be able to convince your spouse to give the relationship another try. Now, by doing this, the agony of withdrawal is temporarily relieved. I'm sorry to say that the relationship may probably not end well even this time. You might need to go through the breakup and reconciling process a few times before you have the conviction that it's time to let go. Now for our question of the day. Is there any other things you would like us to make a video on in regards to marriage separation or even preparation for divorce? Please put it down in the comments below. Initial acceptance. This acceptance might feel similar to surrender if it comes early on in the grieving process. You hold up your end of the breakup because you'll have no other option, not because of your will. You or your spouse might develop adequate control and awareness at this point to see that you are not meant to be. As time goes on, the initial acceptance becomes increasingly substantive, and you both start to independently recognize that at least one of you must maintain some boundaries for a permanent breakup. It may finally come to the point where you understand that it's not just psychologically, physically, and emotionally healthy for you to keep trying. As acceptance deepens, moving on requires you to redirect your feelings of hope, feelings that you're okay without your spouse. Now, accessing this hope is hard. However, as you go on, allowing a meaningful distance between you and your spouse, you get to access it somewhere in your reserves. The grief stages following any type of trauma, including a marriage separation and divorce, can happen within minutes, days, months, or even years. So when you go through a grieving process for a year or longer, you should not judge yourself. While some people may switch pretty fast without warning, others may spend many months or even years feeling like aliens to themselves, or even cut off from the world. However similar to an emotional amputation, going on in life is about learning to be at peace with that part of yourself. Remember, you're not alone in the grieving. It's a part of the human condition, and humans can handle loss and pain in their life. Now, it may not be pleasant, but with time, the pain will fade, and good memories will replace them. And if you find this video helpful, please like and subscribe, and click on the notification bell. Then you'll be notified when we upload any new videos. Now, click on the link down in the description to get our free report on the 7 things not to do when going through a marriage separation. Our subscribe button is up here in the corner. And please check out our videos.